When it comes to national security, money isn't just money. It can be a weapon. That's why Rosa DeLauro's grilling of Scott Bessent is so important. She's not just pressing him on tax fairness or corporate giveaways. She's challenging him on whether the U.S. is serious about protecting its economy from being exploited by China.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My apologies for being late, and apologies to you, Mr. Secretary, but lots of hearings happening here. So just a couple of points, and then I want to ask my question. It's just a follow-up on this IRS piece. I think it's very interesting that, well, first of all, I totally disagree with you, Mr. Secretary. We have a revenue problem, and that's where the IRS comes in. And we think about the debt. We think about the $2.3 trillion that was the debt really built up with the tax cuts to the wealthiest and the biggest corporations in 2017. We're now looking at an additional $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, which are making their way to, again, the richest and to the biggest corporations. That is debt. And that is something that I don't know about yourself and others in the administration who refuse to see that kind of debt. And the almost unbelievable piece of this is the IRS 2024. We invested in it, able to recover more than $1.1 billion from roughly 1,600 millionaires. Projected at the time that investments in high-end enforcement data and analytics, that an additional $851 billion would result in revenue over the next 10 years. The Inspector General has said IRS lost 30% of auditors under Elon Musk's illegal purge. People who are wanting to ensure that millionaires and billionaires are paying their taxes. And the issue is that we're going to pay for those taxes by taking it out of the hide of Medicaid and of children, of low-wage workers, and of seniors. The issue that I want to try to get to, I'm going to make another point, is your comments on your recent comments that seem to call into question the vitality of the textile industry in the United States and national security. I applaud the administration for the steps they've taken on de minimis and closing down that loophole. I think it was very, very important to do this. We need to go further. It needs to be applied to all countries, not just to China. But unbelievable commentary on the U.S. textile industry provides good jobs across this country, particularly in rural areas. The supply chain directly employed 471,000 workers, produced roughly $64 billion in product in 2024. Let me get to my question with only 2 minutes to go here. This is the dealing with is standing up for a mechanism in the U.S. to screen our investments in China, to ensure capital, technology, and know-how are not fueling the capabilities of the Chinese Communist Party. I've had a bipartisan bill to do that for years, helped negotiate the bipartisan bill that nearly passed last year, and I strongly support executive action to address the issue. In fact, we got appropriated funding for Treasury to implement the executive order on outbound investment. Mr. Secretary, I understand that the administration is currently reviewing the executive order. There's a clear bipartisan consensus on the need for an outbound mechanism of that screening regime. Let me ask you, do you support the implementation of such a regime?
Thank you, Congresswoman. This is a very important issue. The outbound security program is an important new tool in our effort to restrict the PRC from exploiting U.S. investment. The program just began a few months ago, and we are learning and we anticipate gaining important visibility into U.S. persons' investments involving PRC entities. We appreciate the interest from Congress, and while legislation is important and helpful, I would like some time for our process to inform any legislation. We would like any legislation to be both flexible and durable.
Well, you know, in your confirmation hearing in January, you noted, and this is a quote, "We should have a very rigorous screening process for U.S. investments in key sectors that could go to China." And in March, you said, "We will make sure that our outbound investment doesn't get used against us. We are going to continue investigating this and where necessary to block it." I heard your answer, and quite frankly, it sounds a little bit wishy-washy. I want to be clear about this. You have expressed support for outbound investment for months now. Has that changed in any way? What's the status of the administration's review of that order? What about the timeline on this? Because it's an important issue. And can you commit that your department will enforce this executive order to its fullest extent?
I have not changed my position. As I said, we are looking at what is working, what isn't, and how the best enforcement mechanisms. And when a bill comes forward, again, we want it to be fulsome and durable, and a 2025 bill for all the nuance that goes with this.
Well, I'm out of time, but please understand, we have bipartisan support. It made it into the continuing resolution, but for the influence of Mr. Musk, and it is critically important for our competitive edge. And I don't believe there's any reason for the administration to roll back. My hope is that we will move forward and keep the pressure on in order to be able to preserve our competitive advantage and not cede to the Chinese communists.
We're in complete agreement.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I would not want to interfere with that bipartisan moment.
Okay. And it's bipartisan legislation, as you know.
I appreciate that.
Great piece of legislation.
What DeLauro is pressing isn't a headline scuffle. It's two connected fights over power, who pays for America's strength, and whether U.S. money is quietly building arrivals. On the first, she draws a straight line from big tax cuts and weakened IRS enforcement to a lopsided system where ordinary taxpayers shoulder more, while a thin slice at the top slips through. Her stat about the IRS recouping over $1 billion from just 1,600 millionaires in 2024 is meant to illustrate a simple point. Capacity works. If you fund the auditors, data tools, and complex case teams, high-end non-compliance becomes less profitable and less attractive. That's not a partisan theory, it's basic deterrence. When she says we have a revenue problem, she's reframing the deficit debate away from cutting benefits for seniors or low-income families and toward collecting what the law already requires from those best positioned to avoid it. Then she pivots to outbound investment, wonky on the surface, existential beneath it. The issue isn't whether Americans should invest abroad, it's whether U.S. capital, technology, and know-how are helping China scale sectors with military and surveillance applications. For years, Washington built inbound screening, CFIUS, to stop risky foreign investment into the U.S. Outbound is the mirror we never installed. The nascent executive program Treasury is standing up is designed to illuminate where money is going and block the truly sensitive deals. DeLauro's agitation about timelines and teeth isn't nitpicking. In geostrategic competition, delay is strategy's silent enemy. If reporting rules are narrow, if prohibitions are porous, or if enforcement waits on endless review, you get theater instead of guardrails. That's why her wishy-washy jab matters. Bessent praises a rigorous process, yet resists crisp commitments on scope and pace. To a budget hawk, that sounds prudent. To a national security hawk, it sounds like drift. And drift is how advanced packaging, AI accelerators, or dual-use sensors get U.S. venture dollars, U.S. management expertise, and U.S. scale discipline, only to boomerang back as supply chain leverage or battlefield edge. Those aren't abstractions, they're the guts of next-gen power. Fold in her textile detour, and you see the domestic mirror of the same dilemma. The de minimis loophole isn't just about cheaper fast fashion, it's about customs visibility, labor standards, and how whole regions lose manufacturing density, skills, and tax base when the playing field tilts. Her numbers on employment and output are there to remind everyone that old industries are often the anchor employers in rural and small city America, and that national security starts with a resilient industrial base, not just chips and jets. There's also a constitutional undertone. She keeps pointing back to Congress's power of the purse, appropriations for Treasury to implement outbound screening, oversight of IRS budgets, and a warning against executive branch foot-dragging that nullifies legislative intent. That's not theater. It's how separation of powers disciplines sprawling programs so they become policy, not press releases. For viewers, here's the practical core. Strength costs money, and if you hollow out tax enforcement at the top, you end up paying for it by cutting care, infrastructure, or readiness somewhere else. And security isn't only about more domestic production, it's also about where your money flows when it leaves. Outbound screening, done narrowly, clearly, and fast, protects freedom to invest while closing the channel that turns U.S. expertise into someone else's leverage. If the administration wants credibility, it needs to publish tight rules, realistic timelines, and visible enforcement actions, not just consultations. If Congress wants durability, it needs bipartisan legislation that locks in scope, adapts to tech shifts, and funds the plumbing, investigators, data, and interagency coordination. And if taxpayers want fairness, they need an IRS that can actually audit the cases that require lawyers, accountants, and time. What do you think is the bigger immediate priority? Fully funding high-end IRS enforcement or standing up a tough, targeted outbound investment screen with real enforcement? Tell me why. If this kind of breakdown helps you cut through the noise, like the video, drop your take in the comments, and subscribe for more straight, high-utility analysis of the hearings shaping policy and power.